Hello, this is Dr. Schamberger, and we're going to briefly discuss the arrest process as part of your work as a police reporter, and then we'll kind of just wrap some things up in conclusion of this talk. So let's look first at the arrest process. When someone is arrested, that person is a suspect and could be brought in a couple of ways on a complaint or a warrant. That warrant may have been signed by a court judge. That person can also be arrested at the scene if enough evidence is overwhelming against that suspect. And then once someone is arrested, then that person is booked. And what that means is the suspect's identification is recorded. The suspect will then be searched and personal effects taken away. Many times this will occur either at the police station or at the jail or correctional facility. Miranda rights will be read, and that's really important. And you do want to know whether a suspect was Mirandized, because if that person wasn't Mirandized, then their constitutional right was not upheld. So that could be something to focus in on as well. And the way you can know that, sometimes you'll be able to see the Miranda card that suspect signs, sometimes you won't, but if you are interested, you can always ask. And when somebody signs that card, when the suspect does that, then he or she is questioned by authorities, and then a formal report is written. And that person also is fingerprinted, photographed, and given a chance to make that phone call. So that does occur with suspects who have been arrested. If felony charges are filed, let me make sure, yes, let's make sure I didn't advance the slides too much. If felony charges are filed, in other words, these are some really serious charges. Felonies can include charges such as homicide, manslaughter, murder. It can also include some possible assault charges as well. So if those felony charges are filed, then the suspect will go on to what is known as an arraignment. And then and in cases of misdemeanor, sometimes it'll go to the arraignment, sometimes it won't, especially if somebody has already pleaded guilty to it, because sometimes that will occur. They will just go ahead and do that. But we'll talk more in detail when we get to the court beat as far as how the particular charges are handled. Sometimes the prosecutor may reduce a felony charge to a misdemeanor, or the suspect can be released without any charges filed, especially maybe something has surfaced or developed that is no longer being held against that suspect. There are different types of felonies. There are felonies that involve charges of violent crime. So again, the murder, manslaughter, homicide. And then there are going to be some property crimes. So maybe some theft, possibly, maybe other types of serious charges involving those. Let's talk about an arraignment, really what happens in an arraignment. An arraignment is going to be that first step to in a court case, basically. It is where the defendant or the suspect will appear before the judge and is going to answer how he or she will plead to the charges brought before him or her. So it's a chance for that person to respond to charges or to issue a plea. And those responses are either going to be guilty or not guilty. You never report guilty or innocent. Everyone is innocent. So that's not the question. The question is whether that person was guilty or not guilty of a charge. And like I said, we'll talk more about the specifics as far as what happens in a court later on, because that's a large module in itself, so we separate that out. And in some cases, a cop reporter, a police reporter, might not handle the court beat. Sometimes that can be two separate entities there. But let's talk now, let's kind of transition, but I just wanted to give you a kind of a basic overview on the arrest process as far as how it occurs on the breaking news end. But let's talk now about enterprising on the beat. So we've been talking a lot about the details and how you respond to things when they occur, but you know, there are moments when a police reporter is going to have to come up with some really good original reporting. That's enterprise work. So these are some things you want to consider. You know, when you start your work, kind of look at the unit first of all. Sometimes there are opportunities that might arise where you get to report on any changes that might occur in the police force in that community. And so that could be an opportunity for an enterprising story. Maybe issues with the officers' pay, insurance is also a concern. Issues with working conditions. You know, officers spend a lot of times in their vehicles, so maybe something could arise where you might want to focus on that. Um, Also issues with city and county government. Many police stations are, as far as their budgets are concerned, they are controlled by tax dollars. So that's going to be coming from, depending on who they report to. So city police will be the city council or city hall. And if it's county police, then it would be funded more through the fiscal court or the county government. Cold cases, those are great opportunities to kind of dig in and see what efforts might have been developed since the crime occurred. Looking at crime trends as well. You know, if you notice a lot of drug activity occurring in a certain location, especially over a month's period, maybe that's an opportunity for a news story. So definitely look at the crime trends, because those are going to be really really key for you as an enterprising police reporter. We've talked about this through the in some of the other videos, but the types of writing, much of the time you're going to be doing the straight news stories or the hard news stories, but there are great opportunities for features, especially if there's a new program that maybe the police or a fire station might have launched and you think it would be a great story. So don't discount those. Those are also great opportunities for you. And there might be times too when you can use the hourglass structure. And this is really key, especially when reporting the breaking news that might involve crime, because it's a really great way to illustrate the moments leading up to the crime or even the moments after the crime occurred. So if you look at the example on the left where it says not hourglass, I'm not going to read that line by line, but you can definitely pause the video and look at it. What I want to specify is how the reason why this is not hourglass is because it really starts um, in a way right at the beginning where a robber took money from a clerk at this particular um, location and everything. And then it indicated how the man showed no weapon but held what appeared to be a handgun. And then it just goes on. Halford said a 19-year-old clerk was counting money. There's really no real good transition that shares with the reader or the audience how this really took place. Okay, those transitions are really key in an hourglass structure. So now let's look at on the right with this example. Pretty much about the same, especially in this part right here in the first half, but where you see in the bold typeface, Halford described the incident as follows. And then it's going to then begin with all the events leading up to that lead sentence. That's the hourglass. It helps with that transition. So that transition statement is really key in an hourglass structure. So if you remember from your JMC 194 days, what hourglass is, we are going to start kind of with the inverted pyramid at first, but then about maybe midway or even a little bit sooner, but we're going to transition now into the storytelling technique aspect. And that's what the example on the right does. And then, of course, the hard news approach, which many of us use when covering breaking news. There's a good example of a delayed ID lead here. A 32-year-old man was charged Tuesday with killing a former girlfriend when she wouldn't leave the back porch of his home, police said. And then the next graph begins with the name of that suspect. Lester Paul Stevens was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, and then it goes on. So this is a perfect example of a delayed ID lead. And that is it. So this concludes our focus on breaking news, especially in the context of cops, crime, fires, and accidents. Please know that really breaking news can occur again in any of our beats. Education beats, it can occur even in business beats, but they just don't have maybe the severity necessarily as the wrecks and the accidents and crime that might occur, but nevertheless, it can happen. Thank you for your attention.